Okay, well, without any further ado, I am extremely thrilled to be introducing the one and only Tom Mendoza. So,
Thanks for.
Tom, welcome.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic and even better now that we're chatting. I
Oh,
cannot
cool.
wait to get into it. I mean, we're going to be talking about culture and leadership. And of course, we have to hear a little bit about one of the most wild, successful success stories in modern business, which was your story of your time at NetApp. And we're going to get into some of the things that helped lead NetApp to the company that it became. But for those of you who don't know, give a little bit of a background on Tom. So Tom Mendoza joined NetApp in 1994, where I recently learned just a few moments ago that he was the 32nd employee as the head of sales to 3 sales reps doing about 600,000 in revenue at that time. He was a huge part of the instrumental growth from true tech startup into one of the most successful Fortune 500 companies in the world, which he saw the growth all the way to $6 billion in revenue. In about year 2000, Tom took the helm as president for about 8 years. During that time, one of the punctuation points at the end in 2009 was he won an incredible award. The company was ranked as the #1 best place to work for by Fortune magazine. Tom also, around year 2000, after a generous endowment, Notre Dame School of Business was named after him. It is the Mendoza School of Business, where he's still extremely active in their athletics program. He often speaks there,
Yep.
and he served NetApp for a 25-year tenure, something you don't see a lot anymore today. These days, he's actively engaged as a member of the board of directors for companies like Varonis, Vast Data, and mParticle. Formerly sat on the board at UiPath and Security Scorecard, where we actually met a few times. Pretty cool. And currently, he speaks on corporate culture, leadership, all around the world, places like Harvard. He's been in front of the Navy SEALs. He's been in all the biggest stages, keynote talks. A moment ago, Tom told me that a year didn't go by when he was actively doing this where he didn't fly at least 250,000 miles a year. He topped out around 375, I think you said.
Yep.
And today, as well as in his past, while he was actively working, Tom's always been involved in incredible charities and giving back. The Pat Tillman Foundation, St. Baldrick's Foundation, the Navy SEALs Foundation, and Justin Tuck's Rush Foundation for Children Literacy. This man needs no further introduction. I mean, wow, what a living legend. Thank you so much for being here, Tom.
Thank you.
Just so thrilled to get into it with you.
Let's do it.
Well, I think one of the things that immediately came to mind for me after reading a lot of what you've written, listening to your talks, and looking back at some of the things that you will leave behind as your legacy is no one starts there, So to all of the young, ambitious, up-and-coming professionals who sometimes feel a little bit lost, did you find your way directly into leadership because you knew you always wanted to do that, or was there an indirect path that you took? Tell us a little bit about how you got there.
It's a great question. No, I did not. When I got out of college, I thought I was going to be a lawyer, but everybody I met who was miserable. So I said, why do I want to do that? And a guy I didn't even know called me one day and said, I'm in a bar in El Paso, Texas, and some guy's trying to sell me stock, which was my brother. And I tried to hire him into technology. He doesn't need a job. He told me to call you. So it's not the usual path into technology, but that's actually what happened. I interviewed in New York. He said, if they hire you, get on a plane. Don't tell them you even know me and just come to work for me. So I ended up in El Paso, Texas. For a guy from New York, that is not a normal starting place. But I'll tell you what went right. I view my first 8 years, in retrospect, coming out of college, as a paid MBA. And I didn't have an endpoint in mind. So what happened initially, once I got in technology, I realized I liked it because it changes all the time. Some people went at that point would go in autos, steel, whatever. That doesn't change. Once you figure it out, it's figured out. Well, for my personality, I like to constantly be changing, challenging. So that, number one, I found the industry I wanted to be in. Number two, I love selling, but specifically, I love solving complex problems for big companies, as opposed to transactional sales. You sell somebody something once. You're working in a store, you sell them, you never see them. So I got put on an account team to go after some big accounts, and I just enjoyed learning their business, figuring out what their problem was that my technology could bring a unique solution to, and then doing it. So that kind of mapped where I was going. When I was 26, I was the first non-engineer ever hired into a company called Data General, and the role I was in.
Wow.
They were a hot young company, but they believed you had to be an engineer to sell technology at that time.
How did you convince them to let you on as a non-engineer?
The guy had already turned down 3 of my friends. The interview went great, and he said, sorry, his boss said, you're not an engineer, you can't come in. So I went in there, and he said to me, at one point he said to me, we have 4 guys in the office, and I've let 3 of them go. So when he got to the point in the conversation where he said to me, I'd love to hire you, but you're not an engineer. And I said, well, how's that working out for you? He just told me you let 3 out of 4 go. I said, listen, the reality is, you don't have to tell them how to make a machine or how to solve a product. You need to understand people and be able to sell to them. You might make the jump of faith that I can figure out technology and I have the other skill, or you could keep going the way you're going and think you need an engineer to talk to an engineer. So he goes to me, I think I'm going to hire you. I said, you don't have the authority to hire me. He went, no. He let the F word go and said, screw you, basically, you're hired. And his boss called me up and told me that he just out of the blue, and he said, if you don't work out, I'm firing him. So, long story short.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
so his neck was on the line, too.
Yeah. So 2 years later, he actually got forced to leave the company, had a personal issue, got pushed out. The guys came to me and said, you need to be the leader here. I said, I don't want to be a leader. I was 26. The next youngest one in my company was 36. I go, look, I'm making more money than I ever made. My biggest, challenge every night is where we're going to go to dinner. I don't want all the, it's like herding cats. I got 8 guys I got to worry about. And they basically said, look, if you don't take it, they'll probably bring in an engineer above us and they'll go right back to the way it was here, which I think was true. So I decided to do it. But what the amazing part was, I say this, if you want to go into leadership, you have to determine where you either give a plaque or get a plaque. Simple thought. But the moment I got to stand on stage and talk about someone who worked for me and why they had won this award, I got a much bigger rush than I did when people talked about it. I always found that a little embarrassing. I was waiting for it to be over quick. You already did it. But from that moment on, 26, I've been in leadership, sales, president, from that moment on. So that was the third. And then I did my first startup 8 years later. It was a guy named John Morgridge hired me. John is one of the legends of Silicon Valley. Cisco sits on John Morgridge Way. He was the first Cisco CEO. But prior to that, he was the VP of Sales and Marketing at a company called Stratus, and I was the first hire on the West Coast. I was at an entrepreneurship thing at Notre Dame. The audience was engineers and business school kids. I had Dave Hitz and James Lau, 2 founders of NetApp with me. I had Doug Leone, who runs Sequoia Capital with me, and there were 4 other VCs. And this is probably 15 years ago. And the audience said, when I leave school, should I go right into a startup? Overwhelmingly, they said, absolutely. Just jump right in. You'll learn so much. And then they finally turned to me and they said, well, what do you think? And I said, I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I can tell you I'm glad I didn't do that, because by the time I did a startup, I knew how to sell. I really knew, I understood how to sell technology well to big companies. I knew how to hire. I knew how to motivate. I'd made mistakes, but I already knew, as you do, you learn. And so now, when I hire, I knew how to hire differently than when I first started. I was there 8.5 years, ended up running half the country, and my career was set. And then I went to Stanford in, 1989, which is 7 years later. They have an executive program, and a guy said to me, do you think you're going to come up with the next great, this guy's VP of engineering of that former company, do you think you'll come up with the next great technology idea? I said, no. He goes, I don't either. He said, but the guy who does going to want to know you. And
exactly.
He the top 5 venture capitalists in Silicon Valley while I was at Stanford. And he said, follow the money. What are they investing in? And they thought storage could be the next big issue now that networks were built and PCs were everywhere. How do you store this information outside a data center? 3 of the 5 were invested in a company called Auspex. They asked me if I'd come in to run a region initially. I immediately went to head of sales in 90 days. And the 2 young geniuses who started that are the guys who founded NetApp. So that's how it all, but at each path, because I get the fact you could be there in your 20s going, man, I don't know where I'm going to end up.
Oh, yeah.
What I would tell you is this, you don't need to know that. What you need to know is find a company that's great to work for. Find a company that will give you training. I really believe in training. Learn on someone else's nickel. Don't start a company when you don't have any experience. That's probably going to lose your friend's money. That's all I'll say. And then excel at everything you do, no matter what it is, and don't leave anything undone. So anytime you decide you're going to leave, I never left for money or title. I left because I wasn't learning anything. I wanted a bigger challenge. Don't leave it undone, though. So if they ask your previous company, did Ronen leave this in a good spot? Absolutely. Did everything he said he'd do.
That's an amazing background. And I love how there's a very clear trail of breadcrumbs that you followed. each chapter picking up new insights about
You know
yourself.
what I would say? That's a great way to put it, but I built on the breadcrumbs.
Mm.
I didn't have a path. I didn't say I want to be in a startup. I want to be a manager. But what I did is I wanted a challenge, and once I realized I was in it, I started to realize what I was good at. And when I took the leadership job, I realized I had the skill of making people want to come through for you. But I like the way you put it, that you do build on everything, and you get insights into what you're interested in and where you want to go, but you don't have to have
Mm.
that map up front.
And I think that you said something there that is really interesting to get into. You found a way to get the people around you to want to go that extra mile. I think that's a little bit of the silver bullet in leadership if you can find it, or it's a little bit of like the golden path if there is a golden path to leadership. And I'm sure over your time you've sort of nailed down what are the things that have to all be true or present to increase the chances of getting people to actually want to follow you into the battle. So
So
what are those things?
well, let me say this. I learned this from my dad. I didn't learn it from him. He wasn't in some big leadership role. My dad had a sixth-grade education, ended up going to war 2 months after Pearl Harbor, self-made guy after that. But when I was growing up, I had an older brother who was a better athlete than me. I mean, he was a sensational athlete. But my dad had 4 kids, and wasn't a great circumstance. Every game I played in Little League, I wrestled, I did this, my dad would make it. And at the end of the day, and we didn't have much, but we didn't feel like we didn't have much. It was one of those situations.
Wow.
And I when I went to college, I just always would think about things that I just don't want to let him down. I knew how much it meant to him when I got to Notre Dame, and it meant a lot to me not to let him down. He had earned it. So what I would say is the answer, Ronan, is you got to earn it. No title makes people feel that way about you. I spoke at West Point in 2009. It's at YouTube if you're interested. And
I've seen that one actually. It's a great talk.
thank you. But they got what I'm talking about. If somebody has a rank, you'll do what they say because they're ordering you. That's very different than I'm doing it because I would follow that guy through that wall. And you weren't, all those miles I flew, I was out there with my team, getting crowds together that they couldn't otherwise draw, and then helping them. I went to India, 10,000, I spoke for 10,000 people in 2 days, 24 hours in, 24 hours back. Got sick for a couple of weeks just it really was a crazy trip. They wrote me this thing, we had 1,000 employees. They all signed it and said, if you ever ask, we'll do anything possible to get it done. Because they knew I'd done that trip. But you have to earn it. That's my only point. You say to yourself, you want to be authentic, you want to be real, and you want to show them. If you don't talk about grit, you demonstrate grit. You show what you're going to do, and people describe you. You don't describe yourself. People describe who you are, and the word you hope they'll say is, this guy was somebody you could depend upon. He was authentic. If he said something, he knew what he was talking about. It wasn't, he said this and did that. He lived the values that he preached. That is how you get people to follow you.
Living the values that you preach. That's an incredible nugget of wisdom right there, especially in a TikTok age where it seems like everything is instant. You could be successful if you just follow these things. But what you're talking about takes time, consistency, and there's not a lot of room for hypocrisy. There's not a lot of room for messing up because trust will evaporate immediately.
I got asked, I gave a talk at Oracle World in front of the 1,500 leaders, and this woman comes up to me, and she worked for a company that I knew was a bad company. I mean, legendary, the CFO and the CEO ended up in jail. But
oh my God.
now they have a new CEO, and they're successful for a period of time. And she said, he'd like you to come talk to him about culture. I go, oh, really? Well, they were a customer of ours, so I said, okay, I'll go talk to them. And I'm waiting in the lobby, and I'm looking, and on the wall are their values. And they were the same as ours. They just didn't live them. So that's 10 times worse. We're going to treat people with respect, and then you tear somebody apart in public, right? You treat people the opposite of what you're talking about. So to me, culture is what's the behavior you witness when you deal with their employees. There's certain companies that come to your mind. Who do you like to buy from? I like to buy from companies that are excited. I love Apple. I love to walk in an Apple store. I love to hear the guy's story or the woman's story selling to me. They're so there to help you. I mean, that's a culture. You feel that. You don't have to tell me, you don't have to put it on a wall anywhere. I got it.
That's incredible. I mean, it's just like parenting, right? You know, your kids will do what you do, not what you say.
Yeah,
If they
that's
see you
right.
doing it, and
They,
in some ways, these are kind of our corporate kids.
oh, well, that's a great analogy. At the end of the day, people, if they believe that you put the hard work in and you really are there for them, they'll try to be there for you.
You know, taking you back a little bit, you tell this one story that I think is incredible. Actually, you just shared it recently on LinkedIn even, and I thought this was perfect. You had not yet missed a quarter of earnings and hitting your projections,
Right.
but that was at risk. These were in the early days. You
Yep.
talked about there was some shortage and a mess up of a certain product, a part that you needed,
Well,
and as a
our
result,
system, our system was based with data storage, so disk drives were the highest. If you paid us $100,000, 70,000 of that was disk drives. So that was the secret sauce was the software, but you're storing information. And Seagate was the biggest supplier in the world. There weren't anyone at that level, and they announced globally that they were putting everybody on, a limit because they didn't
there's
have
a
enough drive.
shortage.
And we weren't even big enough to be buying directly from them. We were buying through a company called Digital. So we couldn't call them up and say, hey, how about us? They were like, who are you? Yeah, we've been public about 3 years. We went from 0 to $1 billion in 6 years. 250 to
Wow.
$1 billion in two, by the way. So one of the most successful companies ever. And we knew we were going to make the quarter. And now, guy walks in and he goes, we have an issue. What's that? Seagate is limiting the supply globally. We will not get enough disks. We were told you will not get enough disks. We definitely couldn't make the quarter. We're like, Dan said, so well, what are you going to do about it? Or what have you done about it? The guy said, well, what we did is we went out on the spot market, which, now you're going to pay, like any other shortage, you'll pay way, way more than you should. But we could buy enough to make the quarter. And he said, and then announced they have plenty of this. They were able to break through the problem they had, and it flooded the market, and the price went through the floor. So we have all these very, very high priced discs that if we ship those discs to solve our problem, our margins are going to go through the floor because you're paid way too much. So we're going to get hit for that. And Dan asked a couple of penetrating questions about, tell me again how we found out, when we found out, when did you do it, how, all made sense to Dan. He turned to me and he said, look, I was president at the time. No, I was vice president of sales. He said, you and the head of marketing go figure out how to get us out of this. And they went on with the meeting. So we left, and I've been working on a problem with, his name's Mark. We couldn't get enough stuff in our resellers' hands. We'd just gone from all direct sales to broadening it to bring in channel partners. And we wanted them to buy demo equipment. Well, to them it was like $125,000. And at that time, that was not something they wanted to do, right? They wanted on loan. So the alternative, we keep that money on our balance sheet and give it to, now you talk about a lot of product all over the world. So I went back in after about an hour and I said, here's what we think we should do. Let's take just that excess disc, because we can rebuy the disc for the systems. They got plenty now. We can buy it at a low price. But for these high-priced discs we own, let's put it out as our cost to the reseller. So if they said 125, they're probably paying 60, 50. They thought, oh my God, I'll take 3. And now our partners will have products. We won't make any money on that, but we won't lose anything. And we'll come out of this with a win-win. And that's what we did. But as you know, the point I said about that story that was such a powerful cultural statement, he never said who did that. And most companies go right to who did that? Who made that mistake? No one, I think the subject of risk is very important. If you don't take a risk, you just took a risk. You don't make a decision, you made a decision. You have to take risks in your life and in business. Now, if you want people to take risks, you'd like them to fence off what could happen, but you need them to do it. So we had a team we sent. Microsoft was either going to be an enemy or we needed them to be an ally. They looked at us as, because people consolidating their products and they were getting less licenses. We sent the team up there for about 9 months and they were getting pummeled. These guys were just, I'm Microsoft, why would I listen to you? But we did get some advocates. And I pulled them out, and we promoted all three of them. Now, they did not solve the problem. But without them, they probably moved us from the 0 to the 40-yard line. And then we put in. Then once I promoted these guys, everybody's like, I want to be on that team. If you had said, well, they didn't come through and put them in some bad situation, then nobody wants to take a risk. And we did that over and over. If I said, Ronan, I'm going to put you on, I never forgot I told you it was a risk. A risk by definition may or may not pay off. But if you put everything into it and make it happen, move it forward. The best employee we ever had was a guy named Suresh Vasudevan. By the way, all top 5 people, he's going to be a CEO 3 times. He was so good. We had a new head of HR. We were talking about Suresh for 3 different challenges. Who's if we put one guy in the company? Oh, Suresh. None of them what he did. And she said, what is it that Suresh does that makes him so valuable? This might be interesting to young people listening. Well, the first one was he took a very broad view of our business day one. He came into business development, ended up running engineering, and we asked him to be a finalist for CEO when he was 32. Joined at 27. Wow. He said, I don't have enough experience to run a company this size. A couple years later, he did run a different company. So he took a very broad view of the business. Not you have this job. You certainly want to be good at it. But there's no secrets to what's going on. Take a real interest in the business. I started asking him questions all the time because I liked the way he thought. Second thing was, in big companies, they have what's called cross-functional teams. You have big problems, everybody can manage or lead what reports to them. The trickier thing is, it may have engineering, it may have sales, it may have marketing components to it, finance. So you put a team of people together. By the way, you don't get paid extra for this. You do it because it's good for the company. But a lot of people are really not that good at that. They only want to talk about what they know. They don't get in and try to solve the overall. But he was unbelievable. But the biggest tip I could give everybody listening today, the reason he skyrocketed, is whatever you gave Suresh, it came back better than you expected. And if people say that about you when the door is closed, you're going somewhere. Because they'll say, what else can we get on it?
Let's just keep raising the bar.
Yeah, he's taken that far enough. Put somebody else on that. What else can we give? What's a big problem? That's another thing. Many people only want to take on a problem that they're already good at. Yeah, I like doing that. That's not usually the biggest problem in the company. If you're that person who raised your hand, I'd be willing to help. I'd be willing to try and solve that problem. If you're a problem solver, people don't miss that. You bring them in the room, good things happen. That's the
you just said something remarkable there as well, which I've heard the late Zig Ziglar say. I'm a huge Zig fan, but he said this a few times. He tells a story about 2 men who go to work for the railroad on the same day. And sure enough, all these years later, one of them's running it and the other one's still working on the railroad. And he says, the difference is that one guy who ended up running the company started by thinking about the company. The other guy who came in and is still in the same job was only thinking about his job every day. And that's a mindset of willing to take risk and willing to grow, which is hard to come by. People are terrified of messing up. We're afraid of failure.
Yeah, this is also why, if you're a failure, that's where you freeze. That's why I say not making a decision is a decision. People say, I can't make a decision, I'm afraid. Well, you just made a decision. Not taking a chance, you just took a chance. You didn't do anything. So I think it's super important that you're in a culture. When you're looking for your jobs, talk to people who are in it. There's a great place to work. Listen, you want to be working for somewhere that trains people, that values young people coming in. They want them to be successful. Tim Duncan was a great basketball player, won 5 titles for the San Antonio Spurs. I read an article, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated late in his career, and they made a point that every time they had a number 1 draft pick, which some years they did, some years they didn't because they were winning so much, or they brought in a free agent. If you remember, they built some guys from International. Tim Duncan held a team meeting and said, what are we going to do to make him successful? What are we going to do for him? A lot of companies bring in people, don't even treat you seriously for the first year to see if you'll make it. Oh, I guess we have to start telling them what we do here. Never believed in that. Once you make the hire, you bring them in. I used to hold meetings. How are we going to make them successful? Because now they got to do their part, which is attitude primarily. They got to want, they got to have grit. They got to really do whatever they can. But you don't throw somebody in and just wait and see if they fail. You help them. That's why we had very low turnover. When the dot-com bubble blew, we were more threatened than any company in technology, I would say.
And that was right around when you took over as president. You had just started.
I hired a guy to run sales to replace me, and he comes in and I go, boy, it was good when I had it. I don't know. I never had a problem. But so 75% of our business was tech or internet, which is what imploded, right? Our stock, we went public at 12, 2-for-1 splits went to 156 when you say it was a successful company. It went to 6 from 156. So
wow.
As much as you tell people don't look at your stock on the way up, they definitely look at it on the way down. And I had a headhunter that I did a lot of work with call me up. He said, I know this is a tough time for you and everybody else, but especially you guys. An observation, there's only 2 companies I can't get people to leave. That's my business, is to move people around. That's Apple and you.
Wow.
He said, people are, we got in planes, not private planes, just normal planes, but me, the founder, James Lau, the founder, and Dan, we split up and we went to every office in the world. We said, we're going to have to do a layoff. We don't know where this is going, but I'll tell you what we do believe. We believe we can bring this back, but we have to go through a tough time. We have to reorient our business. And, we went from $1 billion down to $800 million. Took us 2 years to get back to $1 billion. Then it was 2009, we did $3 billion. 2012, we did $6 billion.
Wow.
And stock came back to, $80, $90 a share. So we brought it way back. Some of it was just inflation before because of .com. But the point of all of that is people wanted to know how they could help, not where they could run to. That's culture. That's how you know you have a great culture.
When you're looking to bring on new leaders, how do you find this in them? Like, is this learnable, or is this something that people have to be bought into before they come to you?
That's a great question. First of all, I think I had to hire new leaders because we were moving into a different segment. We were moving in.
Right.
We were on the engineering side. Now we're going to the commercial side. And I'd say a third of our people were comfortable selling in that environment. A lot of them stayed on this side, but the other one was the growth side. So we had to hire a lot of new people. And I would tell them, I never had a single person ever say to me, boy, this isn't what you said. I would tell them it's going to be a really difficult challenge. I would tell them what I figured was the truth, what I believe was the truth. And then I would say, but here's why I think we're going to win. I think we're going to be an incredibly successful company. And here's why. Here's what we're going to do. And people that came felt like they came home. This is what they wanted. They wanted to be part of a team where they were given the credit for helping build something. We were already tremendously successful, but now that was over. So I would say, look, you're part of a big organization, Sun Microsystems, or wherever you're coming from. If you left, they don't even know you were there. If you're here and you're running federal, if you're here and you're running the East, if you don't succeed, we can't succeed. And so I always tell you tell the story, Ronan, to 2 different people. You're thinking, this is exactly what I want. The other person's going, this is not what I want. You're both right. That's why I told the story that way. And he said, John, this isn't for me. I go, great. That's what I want. I want you to figure you out. It's not for you. But if you come in, what you owe us, I was asked on TV, how do you motivate an unmotivated person? I said, I fire him. I got all kind of shit. But anyway, at the end of the day, my point was, it's not my job to motivate an unmotivated person. If you're not motivated, go do something you're going to be motivated at. You owe it to us to come here wanting it. Think about any sports team you support. If they're not motivated, they're not winning, you're letting you, and if you don't take care of as a leader, you're disappointing all the guys around them. They all know that person doesn't care. That's not an option, going to work and not caring in my world. And I talk about quitting in place, whatever they call it. I just always wanted to be around people who desperately wanted to succeed together. And we're going to either win together or we're not. But we are all going to give it everything we have. We're not going to lose because we don't care.
That speaks very loudly. I mean, you can't, as much as you want to, and I've been there trying to motivate people, like you can try your best and you could use fear tactics, but those are short-lived and have a huge cost. They crush a culture. You can try to get into someone's mind and understand what are you really trying to do and make loose connections to the work. But if they're not there motivated to do the job, it's such a wise lesson to recognize the sunk cost, move on, or help them find something they are motivated to do.
And I'm just honest with them. You don't show up on time. Every time I ask who wants to do something, you never volunteer.
Never, yeah.
You're never that person we think of or your teammates think of. Oh boy, we need him on the team. Maybe you should be on a different team. Think about it. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help you. If you don't care, either show me you care or go do something different. You owe it to yourself. What kind of life is that? You work this many hours every day. You can do something you don't care about? Why would you do it? And by the way, I was very clear to everybody. I'm a very direct person.
And I was just going to say that. By the way, the way you just said that you said it somehow to me just now with this like element of care. It wasn't screw you, you don't care about our company. It was I care about you. You're clearly not thriving here. You don't want to be here. Let's help. Move on. Go do something else.
So I've had people make amazing turnarounds after a direct conversation. And they say, you know what, I've been down. I got this. Maybe he had some problem in his life. We're here to help. We're here to support you. But you need to care about this company. You're one of 4 people on a team. If you don't do your job, they can't win. So just be honest with yourself. If you really don't want to do this job, go find a job you want to do.
Yeah. Life's
too short.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're familiar with Kim Scott's Radical Candor, but you talk a lot about candor even before the book came out.
Yeah.
And that's it right there. That when you can say something clear and direct, it's not mean. It's actually something you need to hear, and that is clear. Clear is what is required in communication when you're leading a team. People have to know exactly where you stand. And one interesting fact that she throws in there, because she has different labels of different kinds of candor. So there's the ideal radical candor of like, you come from a position of care and you say it clearly. She says the next best way of communicating is the aggressive, clear a-hole. Like the person who's actually going to say what they need to say, even if it's mean. She says that's better than what she calls ruinous empathy. The leader who can't say what you need to hear because they feel bad.
So I tell people this. Once I got up to a certain level, I had a lot of levels of people working for me. So as opposed to you see everybody every day so you can judge them. I just wanted to be clear. If you say to people, do you move too slow, too fast, or perfect when you take an action on somebody? Anybody who's honest says too slow. Mm-hmm. And then they go, that's because I care so much. Wait. So here's a tool to stop that. Areas of improvement and strengths on a piece of paper. Someone's name, areas of improvement, and strength. Whichever way your pen goes tells you everything you want to know. If you take a person that you really think is a high performer, no chance you're going to areas of improvement. But in fairness, everybody can improve. That's why I don't put weakness. But if you go, they don't do this, they don't do that. But in fairness, stop. You have a problem. This is how you think of them. And people go, well, what do you do with it then? I go, talk to them. I say, Ronan, I know you do a lot of things well here, and I know that you have aspirations to move further. It's not going to happen unless you change some things. I'm going to tell you what they are. When I have an 8:30 meeting, you can almost bet that door will open at 8:45 for you to walk in. And you'll go, oh, the car, this, that. We don't care. Whatever the things are that's on your mind that irritate you, if you don't say it, you start not wanting to see that person. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the time when you go to fire, I've had people say I'm going to fire Harry. I said, was Harry a fit when we hired him? Yeah, he was a fit. Oh, does Harry work hard? Yeah, he works hard. Does Harry, all the things I said, so, and they go, they're all yeses. I go, what did Harry say when you told him he wasn't performing? Oh, I haven't had that.
Oh, I didn't tell him. Yeah.
You didn't know I'm going to fire him?
Yeah, I'm blindsiding him. It's shocking how frequent that happens.
Well, that's because he's been avoiding that conversation. I said, listen to me. You owe it to them to have that conversation. And I've had people say to me, you know what, Tom, this is me, I'm going to quit. Okay. Not that often, though. I've had it. More often, I've had people go, you know what? I can do a lot better.
Thank you. They say thank you for the feedback. Yeah.
When you get feedback, you really don't get to say, I don't agree. Or what you do is get to listen to it, take it in, and either you're going to do something with it or you're not. People care enough to give you feedback. They care about you. I'm not doing it to be mean, but if I don't tell you, that's mean. Then later on you go, why didn't you say something? I could have fixed that. Well,
I love the reframe you just gave. It's not that you're doing something mean. You're actually doing the nice thing. That person needs that information.
I want them to know. Again, in most cases, I do have a lot of good thoughts about them. But there's certain things that they're doing, and this isn't just me, this is my leaders. I'll say to them, when I do that test, there'll be a number of people on the left. And I say, have you talked to them about that? The most common answer is no.
It's really shocking how often that is. That's always my first question. Anytime I'm coaching leaders, I was actually working with the CEO of this company, and she was like telling me about a sales rep who was there forever and she's struggling, not doing great. They're having a lot of conflict. And I'm like, what does she think about all this? You got to start there before you start looking for the replacement. Start with a conversation.
Yeah.
There's some sort of blockage there. And I think that there's this degree of more advanced leadership, or at least having enough experience to realize it's actually less painful to have a moment that feels awkward than to have months or, long periods of time of someone
It
struggling.
won't end well if you don't address it. The other thing is, the moment you have that conversation with somebody, you feel better. Because if you don't, you're carrying all this feeling. That's why you start to avoid them. Now you've told them the truth. Oftentimes they feel that you get a different relationship. Because if you don't, you're going to start treating them different because they're irritating.
Absolutely. Man, Tom, I would love to keep this going on and on and on forever, but I think we have time for maybe one last
Okay.
idea here. And what I want to leave the audience with, of course, is, if you were going all the way back and starting all over again, you're coming fresh out of college, let's say, with what you know now, is there anything that you would say, I would do that a little bit differently?
I still would, for me, I would like to be in technology or something that's broad. One of the things I like about technology is it's not geographically bound. You can do it anywhere. If you in a law practice, you typically are in that practice, and then you built the practice, insurance, but whatever field you choose, do something that you find interesting. Talk to people already in the field so you know what it really is. That's why I didn't go to law. I met 3 lawyers that all big shots. Would you do this again? They all said no. I had to do it again. That's a good question. If you had to do this again, would you do it? In my case, it would be yes. Well, okay, then keep the conversation going. Why? But if the answer is absolutely not, doctors say no a lot now. 20 years ago, everybody's wanted to be a doctor. You talk to doctors, say, because medical has changed so much, right? So I'm just saying, don't worry about where it was. Where's it going? So do you enjoy it? Then get in. What I would do, though, is find out what you think you want, like financial service. Doing what in financial services? I realized I wanted to sell. And I wanted to sell solutions to complex problems. That was an epiphany. I didn't know that until I got into it. Once I had that, then I was like, okay, where is that skill valued? Who would really like, where could I keep accelerating or growing what I'm doing? And it just came naturally. Once I had the nugget of what I really wanted to do, you could do it for different companies and different opportunities will come your way. But what is it that you're going to excel at that makes you unique and you want to do it? You like it. You get in financial services and you'll find a niche in there. You thought you were going in for this, then you find out that's not that interesting. There's no customer contact in that job. I actually need a job with customer contact. I want to talk to people. I'd like to serve people. Well, now that's a big breakthrough. You know what you want to do. Now you say, what companies will value that? And keep this in mind. Many companies have the problem of the aging sales force, aging workforce. And so they're looking for young people. Good companies are looking for young people knowing they have to train them. They know you don't know. But they're looking for people who are hungry. They're looking for people who, when you go for a job application, you don't go in there and say, I had a guy say to me, give me one. He flew in from Germany for an interview. He says, give me one good reason I should work for NetApp. I said, I can't think of one. That's not my problem. He's going to tell me what you can do for me. I'm not here to tell you what. But I've had other people do enough work before the interview where they get smart questions. If you say you want 15 minutes, don't use that as a way to get an hour, because not a guy will get pissed off and he just screwed up the schedule. Just stick to the time you asked for. Do enough research so you can ask them intelligent questions. And show an enthusiasm to be a part of what they're doing. And then they'll either give you another 15 minutes or ask you back or hire you. They will. That's what they're looking for. They know you don't know, but being apathetic and acting like you're a big shot is probably not going to do much for you.
Tom, I can't thank you enough. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, this is incredible. So thank you so much for making the time to
Thank you. It
have
was a lot
this
of fun, man.
conversation.
I'm glad to see
And
you doing well, man.
before we let you go, thank you. Yeah. Before we let you go, where can people find you? What do you want them to know? Anything you want to share before we depart?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn with a lot of business posts. And I have so many people say, man, I really appreciate you posting. That's why I do it. I'm not looking for anything in it for me, but I feel like very fortunate and I get to give back. I'm on Twitter, but that's mostly for my own enjoyment, whatever they call it today.
A lot of Notre Dame videos on there.
Well, it used to be a lot more enjoyable. But primarily, I think from a business point of view, LinkedIn is what I connect through.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much, Tom. And to everyone else, thank you for tuning in.